This week on Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News, ensuring equitable access to Colorado's natural resources.
Equality and equity means that my friends and family in Aurora don't have to go somewhere, that it's in their communities.
Our state's beautiful parks, trails, and open spaces provide endless natural benefits, but not everyone benefits the same.
We're the ones who suffer. Our communities are not built for them. We're surrounded by highways. We're surrounded by train tracks.
Today, a real talk on how historical inequities still deprive some communities of these experiences.
Plus, the work being done across the state to address the issue and make the outdoors more inclusive for everyone. Welcome to Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Heffel.
And I'm Denver7's Micah Smith. Each week in a partnership between Denver7 and CPR News, we have a real talk about issues impacting underrepresented people from across Colorado, and we amplify voices you may not always hear.
And today we're discussing efforts to make Colorado's trails and parks more equitable and inclusive.
There's a big lack of diversity when it comes to outdoor recreation. This is dubbed the nature gap. Research shows people of color are far less likely to engage in outdoor recreational activity. They are also 3 times more likely to live in places without immediate access to nature.
Now, oftentimes this is brushed off as a difference in income or cultural differences, but the truth behind the nature gap has deep roots in systemic racism.
Those systemic issues are the unequal distribution of nature's benefits based on race, income, and age. However, there is a lot of work happening across the state to expand access to people who have been historically excluded. So here to tell us more about some of those efforts is environmentalist expert Taisha Adams. She was the first Black woman to serve as commissioner to Colorado Parks and Wildlife and is now a Boulder City Council member. Taisha, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Historically, how did systemic inequities restrict access to outdoor recreation?
From the very beginning, the very founding of our country, there were laws that actually limited Black people from learning how to swim. Enslaved Africans in particular were barred from learning how to swim because slave owners had feared that they would use that knowledge and wisdom, that ancestral knowledge and wisdom, right, to escape to freedom. And so from very early on, laws like that, also we know of redlining, but we also forget about issues around transportation, right? We often focus on housing, but transportation is another key barrier to being able to access funding. But ultimately, the question comes down to who gets to decide. When you look at who gets to decide, remember, I'm the first African-American woman to serve on the commission, a commission that has existed for over 100 years. And so when I think about who gets to decide and I look who decided, I'm seeing those disparities of representation on who gets to decide where we're going to put our playground, where we're going to put our trail, who's going to monitor that trail.
Let's go deeper with that. I mean, because this is showing up in Colorado, this access to outdoor spaces, it is so deep, it seems, in the historical nature of just being. How is this showing up here in Colorado in those outdoor spaces today?
In the 12 years that I have lived in Colorado, I have seen a significant increase in racial and ethically diverse representation in the outdoors, both in my own appointment by Governor Polis to the Commission for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, as well as when I look at city councils, county commissioners. Those areas are starting to change, and that has been an absolute critical, necessary shift in who gets to make decisions about our community, about our present and our future.
Yeah.
When we talk about systemic, that's getting to the root of the system. Research also shows that Black farmers have historically been disadvantaged when it comes to receiving USDA loans for generations. Is this outdoor equity issue similar, or is something different at play here?
I would argue that, again, it is very similar to the issues that are faced by our Black farming communities, one in Lyman, hello, Wild Boyd Farms. But I share that because, again, it goes back to we have our first woman serving as a commissioner of agriculture ever in the state of Colorado. And so, again, when we're not at the table, sadly, we are on the menu again and again and again.
So you're at the table now, and things seem to be changing, right? You've worked with the state Outdoor Equity Fund. What is that, and what does it hope to achieve, and how are you putting kind of your stamp on that?
Well, the fund actually invests in organizations that are working to increase access to the outdoor for youth and families from communities that are traditionally underserved. This is rural, urban, and suburban communities across our state. And one organization in the city of Boulder, a city that many think, oh, everybody has access. They don't, spoiler alert, Women's Wilderness. Women's Wilderness has a program that is working with new arriving immigrants to support their mental, physical, and emotional health as they transition into our country, but not assimilate, right? But recognize that important and that connection is really critical. They're actually going to be up in Rocky Mountain National Park this weekend, as well as Outdoors Oath, which again is a partner in our Outdoor Futures initiative to spread this outdoor equity across the country. That effort was led by those in the communities that were directly impacted by the lack of access, opportunity, and representation. And so I want to honor and center community-led, community-driven as the major success of that program. I also want to lift up that there is actually a board that administers that grant program that is representative of the communities that have been chronically underinvested and chronically underrepresented. It's not about making funds available and having access. It's always must be coupled with representation and the power and authority to make decisions. I would be remiss if I did not bring up the Civil Rights Act of 1875.
Okay.
1875.
1875.
Girl, holler at your girl, everybody. 1875. We often talk about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but we forget about the Civil Rights Act of 1875, which codified equality of all men in public spaces. That included outdoor spaces. And so these laws that allowed us access to the outdoors have already existed. That was taken away within 5 years. This is not the first time that we have been confronted with these inequities and the opportunity to do something about it.
In terms of access to the outdoors, what does that specifically mean? Is it being able to go to a playground? Or is it to say, we're going to go hiking? We're going to go, into nature. We're going to go into the foothills of Colorado. What does that mean? And is there a minimum baseline there?
In addition to wanting to go somewhere, right, to the Western Slope or wherever, there's also having access in my own community. I live in the city of Boulder. I don't have to go anywhere.
Right.
And if anything, equality and equity means that my friends and family in Aurora don't have to go somewhere, that it's in their community. So I'm excited about the work and efforts to ensure green spaces and places in the communities that have been ignored with, less tree canopy, higher rates of asthma, exactly. And so when we don't have those green spaces in place, we know that exacerbates our health outcomes. It cripples, pun intended, our healthcare systems. I also think about the economic impacts to our community and the opportunities that we have with the outdoor industry.
Well, you mentioned Aurora. We're going to be talking about Aurora and some other areas that you just mentioned later on in the show. But for now, Boulder City Councilwoman Taisha Adams, thank you so much for joining us for this Real Talk.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we are just getting started with this Real Talk. Such a great conversation. Coming up, Colorado's many trails can offer a great pathway to get outside, but their benefits are not equally distributed across all communities.
So hear from one group hoping to change that through their work on one of Denver's most popular trails. This is Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. Welcome back to Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. I'm Denver7's Micah Smith.
And I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Heffel.
Trails and greenways can provide powerful benefits. On the surface, they can offer people of every age, ability, and background a space for safe, inexpensive outdoor activity and recreation.
But in practice, these benefits are not always equal. Low-income neighborhoods and communities of color are traditionally underserved and often left out or underrepresented in the development of these trails.
Take Denver's Highline Canal Trail, for example. It's 71 miles long and stretches from Waterton Canyon in Littleton out east to near DIA. If you travel the whole trail, you'll see some beautifully cared for areas with paved paths and vast tree canopies.
But a couple miles away, the same trail runs and turns inaccessible, with some areas overgrown, covered in trash, and in need of investment and improvement. And that's where the Highline Canal Trail Conservancy comes in, working to improve the trail and make it more equitable. And so here to tell us more is the Conservancy's Director of Development, Lindsay Morey. Thanks for being here today, Lindsay.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
So there are some sections of the trail that are differently cared for than others. Why is that?
Yeah. I think, first of all, you suggested, the Highline Canal is one of the longest urban trails in the country. It's 71 miles. It's 860 acres, larger than Central Park in New York City. It really traverses the socioeconomic mosaic of our region. And so part of it has to do with all of the different jurisdictions that it touches having different priorities and, importantly, different resources. I think a second reason comes from its history as a water conveyance. And so its primary use, having been owned by Denver Water, was to deliver irrigation water. So there was a lack of recognition in some communities of the canal as an open space.
Lindsay, tell us more about the work of the Highline Canal Conservancy. How does equitable access fit into your overall mission?
Absolutely. The Highline Canal Conservancy is a nonprofit. We were formed in 2014 with the mission to preserve, protect, and enhance all 71 miles of the Highline Canal, importantly, in partnership with the public. What that has looked like for us has been leading robust public outreach, planning, and now we're moving to implementing a number of projects along all 71 miles. But equity has really been central to the work that we've done from the beginning because there's a recognition of the varied communities and conditions along the canal.
What tangible actions are you taking to make it more equitable? Because that it's such a long trail.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, you can really start to see a stark difference, particularly as you get to the more northeastern stretches of the canal in the city and county of Denver, in Aurora, and in Green Valley Ranch. And that kind of northeasternmost 28 miles of the canal we refer to as the Northeast collectively. We really have made a concerted effort to both prioritize engagement, programming, outreach, as well as investment of the dollars that we raise into those communities, that 28 miles. Notably, we recently received a $7 million grant from Great Outdoors Colorado. The entirety of that grant will be dedicated specifically to those communities where there has been a historic lack of investment.
Yeah.
What difference has the work of the Conservancy made for communities often left out of these recreational spaces?
Thank you. I think that's a great question. We've really worked to center and to co-create and co-design our projects and programs with the neighbors and the users of the canal in these communities. And I'd like to highlight the work of our Northeast Committee. It's 9 dedicated citizens who volunteer to do outreach, engagement, and planning. They've got a host of projects that they're working to implement. And I think over the next few years, we're already seeing some projects implemented. For example, our partners in the city of Aurora just completed an overpass over I-70 that closes a really significant gap in the trail. And over the next few years, there will be tens of millions of dollars of investment in projects that will improve accessibility, signage, things like benches, the tree canopy. The canal is a natural resource.
Yeah. So, Lindsay, are we getting there? Is this equity happening? Because I think there is the governmental side of things, the communities and the elected officials, but there's also the community that is saying, we want these spaces. And I think, are they working together? Is that equity starting to happen?
Absolutely. The Highline Canal Conservancy is a public-private partnership. We work in close partnership with the 11 cities and counties that the canal touches. And the investment that they're making, so the Highline Canal Conservancy is raising funds to implement projects and programs along all 71 miles, as I mentioned, with a focus in these communities in the Northeast. But every dollar that we invest is matched at least 1-to-1 by our public partners, oftentimes many more. In the coming years, there will be, as I mentioned, tens of millions of dollars of investment seen in these communities that will really transform both the access as well as the natural character and ecological quality of the canal.
Lindsay, why is it so important for the Conservancy to try to help connect underserved communities to nature, to the trail specifically?
I think in addition to being one of the longest urban trails in the country, the canal has 1 million annual users. There's 350,000 people who live within a mile. There are 24 schools within a quarter mile. So it represents a tremendous opportunity for people across the region to take advantage and to enjoy the benefits of access to nature. And those benefits are, well documented, whether it's for your physical health, your mental health, and, removing those barriers to access, improving equitable access, and ensuring that people feel safe and welcomed and healthy in these along the Highline Canal. It just represents a tremendous opportunity. I think especially at a time when, going to the mountains or accessing national parks, for example, isn't necessarily as available to everybody as it used to be.
Yeah, we have timed entry. There's a cost associated.
Exactly.
You need transportation to get out to our beautiful national and state parks, whereas the trail might run right behind your home.
Exactly.
I hear you on that. All right, Lindsay Morey, Director of Development for the Highline Canal Conservancy. Thank you so much for joining us for this Real Talk.
Thank you.
Still ahead, not only are there equity concerns with Colorado's trails and parks, but also with the sidewalks in your own neighborhood.
Coming up, one group's effort to get more people outside and walking and the difference that it's making. This is Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. Welcome back to Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Heffel.
And I'm Denver7's Micah Smith. Today we're talking about making outdoor spaces in Colorado more equitable. That includes the sidewalks in your own neighborhood.
Now, there's an ongoing movement in Denver's most diverse neighborhood, Montbello, called Montbello Walks. It encourages people to get outside and walk 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week.
All right, this sounds simple, but the purpose is far greater.
Joining us now is Pam Giner, founder of Montbello Walks. Pam, thanks so much for being here. I heard you walked here this morning.
Yeah, well, we didn't walk here, but we had a 30-minute walk before we came.
There you go. So walking this 30 minutes a day outdoors, it really does sound super simple. So for people in Montbello, why is it not?
Accessibility, safety, amenities in the community. I mean, when you get outside and walk, you want to be able to feel safe on your sidewalks. You want to be able to stop and sit down and rest. You want to be able to connect with other community members if nobody's outside. Yeah. That's not happening.
Yeah.
Are there other issues, like maybe infrastructure issues in terms of, you mentioned safety and accessibility?
Sidewalks. We'll start with that one. For 55 years, there has never been sidewalks in the entryway into the community of Montbello at I-70 in Peoria. And I know this for a fact because I was a child in this neighborhood. Yeah. There's a swamp there, and there's lots of water in the street every time it rains or snow thaws. And there's no sidewalks there. So the highway, I-70, is what the intersection, and there has never been sidewalks there. People are walking alongside 50-mile-an-hour traffic. And so that was a big, big concern of mine when I started this advocacy work. I'm like, why isn't this fixed? Yeah. Mothers with their babies in strollers, you're walking along the street trying to get to the RTD. That's not safe. You've got wheelchairs who are bumping along, losing screws. I did not know that their wheelchairs would be broken down, just like a car. You could lose screws, and now they're not functioning as they should be because of the lack of access and safety on the streets.
Yeah. Montbello is not known for its outdoor spaces, but there are outdoor spaces, but it really sounds like just being able to get there is one of the main issues, because I wouldn't want to walk next to 50-mile-per-hour traffic, and I know you don't want to walk next to 50-mile-per-hour traffic, but so how is this advocacy helping to raise the issue that, hey, we just need sidewalks here to walk and get around?
You know what? We started, I joined an organization called Girl Trek. It is an international Black women's nonprofit health movement. And it's all about inspiring Black women and women of color to get outside, to heal ourselves, to connect to our community, to be about the change that is needed in our communities. And when I joined this organization in 2016, that was one of the first things I recognized, was that my community was the exact same way as it was when I was a child. But after raising 16 children in this neighborhood and coming outside, I realized that there's a lot of things that have not been changed and that needed to change, such as sidewalks, such as stop signs, crosswalks, bicycle lanes, park amenities. I mean, it was like the whole community was just going downhill while it was multiplying in size. And sidewalks was a necessity. So we started doing these walk audits with this organization, Girl Trek. And that included pulling people into the streets with us, like Community Planning and Development, CDOT, executive directors, Kiewit, all the construction, traffic control. I mean, all these people that are involved in making sure that a street is functioning the way it's supposed to. So these walk audits were helpful. And that's where, from walking in the community, you bring the residents out, they walk it, you start evaluating these areas, you start doing these walks with city planners, and then you have, get them to the point where they're going to make a decision to fix this. So we now have over a mile of sidewalks from 47th to 38th in Peoria, which go under the I-70 interchange, which was major.
That is a very big deal. Through all of your advocacy, all of your research, your walk audits, who would you say, in your opinion, lacks access the most to outdoor spaces? We're talking sidewalks, trails, and parks.
Communities of color. We definitely lack the access to those things because our communities are not built for them. I mean, we're surrounded by highways. We're surrounded by train tracks. Our communities are very, very densely populated, so there's no room for trails or additional parks. So, yeah, we're the ones who suffer.
Tell me what it's like when you all go out on a walk. Do you go together? Do you go individually? How do you make yourself visible in this community saying, we're walking today?
Here's where I'll plug Girl Trek again. Girl Trek emphasizes, number one, I'm going to free myself first. I know I need to walk for my health, for my mental health, my physical health. I'm not going to wait on anybody, and I'm not going to ask permission to get outside and walk. But as I'm walking, I want to connect with other women. I want to share the opportunity to join this organization, to get them engaged. And once we get engaged, like they say, when Black women talk, things change. So we start advocating for the needs that we have in our community. Additional park amenities, tree canopies, all of that kind of stuff, water.
Pam, for our viewers and listeners, they may not know this because they can't see them, but you came here with a very special group of ladies today. Tell me who they are and what they're doing in community.
Thank you. I would be remiss if I did not include the senior steppers. My Bellow Walks is very committed to getting our seniors outside walking for their life. We're dealing with isolation. We're dealing with inactivity, and we're dealing with community injustices. And so the senior steppers have been walking for 9 years in the Montbello area. And they're out, they're growing, they're healthy, they're engaged, they're committed. And I just want to give them a plug and thank them for their participation in our program.
And I just want to say, Pam, I've seen you in action. You've created a lot of change. Even when you're just out trying to relax and enjoy yourself in outdoor spaces, you're constantly monitoring and thinking of ways to make the community better, make outdoor spaces more accessible, and you're making a huge difference in Montbello.
Thank you.
Pam Giner with Montbello Walks, thank you so much for joining us for this Real Talk.
Thank you, too.
And that is this episode of Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. Every week, we'll have a real talk on issues that impact Coloradans who are often overlooked.
You can find all of our episodes on denver7.com/realtalk or at cpr.org/realtalk. Have a great day.